Have you ever, like, really wondered what makes you you? You know, like, what creates that sense of self, that feeling of being inside your own head?
It's a fascinating question.
Today, we're going, like, deep into this theory
Yeah.
that might just blow your mind.
Okay.
It suggests that your feelings
Uh-huh.
and even your sense of self
Okay.
are, like, deeply rooted in how your brain predicts
Right.
and interprets sensations from your body.
Interesting.
So it's like your brain is constantly running its own internal simulation
Yeah.
of your body,
Yeah.
predicting what you're going to feel next.
We call this interoceptive inference.
Okay, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Internal simulations. That sounds pretty sci-fi.
I know, right?
Where is all this coming from?
Well, we're drawing from some cutting-edge research here,
Eh?
including a landmark paper on the role of prediction in the brain.
Okay.
And, get this,
Yeah.
we'll also be exploring how these ideas connect to depersonalization disorder,
Depersonalization disorder.
a condition where people feel detached from their bodies and emotions.
So this isn't just theoretical.
No,
It has real-world implications.
absolutely.
Wow.
It all boils down to the idea of the embodied self.
Okay, the embodied self.
We're going to explore how your physical sensations and your sense of self are, deeply intertwined.
All right, you've got me hooked.
Okay.
Let's unpack this interoceptive inference thing.
Okay.
How does it actually work?
So imagine your brain as like a thermostat.
A thermostat.
It's constantly trying to maintain a stable internal state like temperature
Okay.
by predicting and adjusting.
Right.
This is called homeostasis,
Homeostasis.
your body's way of keeping everything in balance.
So, like, when I get cold,
Uh-huh.
my brain predicts I need to warm up and I start shivering.
Exactly.
Okay.
But it goes way beyond temperature.
Oh, wow.
Your brain is making predictions about all sorts of bodily sensations.
Like what?
From your heart rate and breathing to hunger pangs and even emotions.
Oh, wow. So it's like my brain is saying, okay, I predict the heart will beat now,
Huh?
and then it checks in with the actual heartbeat to see if it was right.
Precisely.
Wow.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
When there's a mismatch between the brain's prediction and the actual sensation,
Yeah.
it creates a prediction error.
A prediction error. So does that mean my brain messed up?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
These prediction errors are actually crucial for learning and adapting.
Oh, so they're good.
They help your brain refine its model of the world and your body.
So my brain is basically learning by trial and error,
Yeah.
constantly tweaking its predictions to get better.
Exactly. Fascinating.
To give you a vivid example,
Okay.
think about the rubber hand illusion.
The rubber hand illusion.
You might have seen videos of this experiment where a fake hand is placed in front of someone
Okay.
and their real hand is hidden.
Mm-hmm.
By stroking both the fake and real hand simultaneously,
Okay.
the brain starts to incorporate the rubber hand into its body model.
Even leading to the illusion of feeling touch on the fake hand.
Whoa, wait, so people actually start to believe the rubber hand is theirs?
It happens, yeah.
That's both fascinating and a little creepy.
I know, right?
That's wild.
It highlights the power of prediction in shaping your sense of self.
Okay.
Your brain is constantly integrating sensory information with its predictions, even if that information is a bit off.
So our brains are constantly predicting
Yeah.
and updating their models,
Right.
but are they also trying to control our experiences to match those predictions? Like if my brain predicts I'll be thirsty soon, will it make me go get a glass of water?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
And it leads us to the concept of active inference.
Active inference.
Your brain doesn't just passively receive information.
Okay.
It actively seeks out information and even controls its environment
Wow.
to minimize those prediction errors.
So it's not just about predicting the future.
Right.
It's about making those predictions come true.
Exactly. Think about something as simple as reaching for your coffee cup.
Yeah.
That action isn't random.
Okay.
It's driven by your brain's prediction of what it will feel like to hold the warmth on your hand, the taste of the coffee.
Right.
Your brain is essentially saying, make it so.
Wow. Our brains are basically tiny puppet masters, pulling the strings to make our predictions a reality.
Yeah, in a way.
But if our brains are calling the shots,
Right.
does that mean we're not really in control of our actions?
That's a good question.
Are we just along for the ride?
That's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
To understand how you experience a sense of control, we need to talk about sensory attenuation.
Sensory what now?
Sensory attenuation.
Sensory attenuation.
It's your brain's ability to filter out or
Sure.
turn down
Okay.
the intensity of sensations that are predictable or self-generated.
Okay.
For example, you don't consciously register every tiny muscle movement when you walk, or the feeling of your clothes against your skin all the time.
It's true, I don't.
If we were constantly bombarded with all those sensations, we'd be completely overwhelmed.
I can only imagine.
This sensory attenuation is especially important for our sense of agency.
Our sense of agency.
That feeling that I am the one causing an action.
Okay.
The theory suggests that this sense of agency is actually enhanced by the brain's ability to attenuate or downplay the sensory feedback from our own movements.
So in a way, the less we consciously feel our own actions,
Yeah,
the more in control we feel.
that's the idea.
That's counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but it kind of makes sense.
It does. If your brain didn't attenuate those sensations, every action would feel like a huge effort, like you're constantly fighting against your own body.
Wow.
By filtering out the predictable sensory feedback, your brain creates a sense of smoothness and ease in your movements,
Right.
which contributes to that feeling of agency.
Okay, that's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But how do researchers actually study this sensory attenuation thing?
Well,
Especially in relation to our sense of self.
there are some clever experiments that look at this.
Oh, cool.
One key finding is that sensory thresholds, how sensitive you are to touch, sound, etc., actually increase during movements.
So I'm less sensitive when I'm moving.
You become less sensitive to external stimuli when you're actively doing something.
That's interesting.
So your brain is basically saying, hey, I'm busy doing this thing, so turn down the volume on everything else.
Wow, that's amazing.
It supports the idea that your brain is actively attenuating self-generated sensations to create a smoother experience of your own actions.
So if I'm piecing this all together,
Yeah.
our sense of self is this constantly updated model built on predictions and sensory feedback.
Right.
And our sense of agency is linked to the brain's ability to filter out the predictable sensations from our own actions.
That's a great summary.
But what happens when this system goes awry? What happens when it doesn't work?
That brings us to the fascinating and sometimes unsettling world of depersonalization disorder,
Depersonalization disorder.
which we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
Great.
Depersonalization. It sounds intense.
It can be, yeah.
But before we get to that, can we quickly recap the key ideas we've covered so far?
Absolutely.
Let's see.
We started by introducing the concept of interoceptive inference.
Interoceptive inference.
How your brain is constantly predicting and interpreting what's happening inside your body.
Right.
Yeah.
And we learned that those prediction errors, those little mismatches between what we expect and what we actually feel, are actually a good thing because they help our brains refine their models.
Precisely.
Right.
And then we explored how this predictive process might be linked to our sense of self,
Okay.
with our brains constructing this ongoing model of me
Right.
based on predictions, sensory feedback, and past experiences.
So there's this ever-evolving idea of ourselves. And we can't forget about sensory attenuation, the brain's way of filtering out those predictable sensations,
Yes.
especially those related to our actions, which helps us feel a sense of control.
Exactly.
That was a really interesting concept.
And now in the next part, we'll explore what happens when these finely tuned processes go off kilter,
Oh,
leading to the strange and often distressing experience of depersonalization disorder.
okay.
But for now, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Okay, hit me.
If your brain is constantly predicting and shaping your reality, how much control do you really have over who you are?
Ooh, that's a deep one.
I know, right?
I'm already looking forward to part 2.
Me too.
Join us next time as we continue this journey into the embodied self
Yes.
and delve into the mysterious world of depersonalization. Welcome back. So last time we were talking about how our brains are basically these prediction machines constantly trying to figure out what's going on in our bodies and the world around us. And you left us with this cliffhanger about depersonalization disorder.
Yeah.
What exactly is depersonalization, and how does it fit into all this brain prediction stuff?
Right. So you know how we've been talking about the embodied self?
Yes.
That sense of being located within your own body and experiencing the world through your senses?
Mm-hmm.
Depersonalization is a condition where that embodied sense of self gets disrupted.
Okay.
It's like your brain and body are no longer on the same page.
So instead of feeling like I am experiencing the world,
Yeah,
it's more like I am watching myself experience the world.
that's a common description, yes.
Wow.
People with depersonalization often talk about feeling detached from their bodies,
Right.
like they're observing themselves from a distance.
Oh, wow.
Emotions might feel muted,
Okay.
or thoughts can seem like they belong to someone else.
That sounds incredibly unsettling.
It is.
Yeah, because you question the very nature of what it means to be you.
Right.
But how can a brain that's so good at predicting and controlling
Yeah.
suddenly lose track of something as fundamental as the self?
That's what makes depersonalization so intriguing.
Yeah.
And it's where the research gets really interesting. Remember we talked about those prediction errors?
Yeah.
Those instances where the brain's prediction doesn't match the actual sensory feedback from the body.
Yeah, and you said those errors are usually a good thing
Mm.
because they help the brain refine its models.
Exactly.
Okay.
But imagine if those errors become too frequent or too intense,
Right.
or if the brain starts to misinterpret them. That's one of the leading theories about what might be happening in depersonalization.
So it's not just about the predictions themselves,
No.
but about how the brain reacts to them.
Right. It's about how much confidence or weight the brain places on different sources of information.
Okay.
We call this precision weighting.
Precision weighting.
Think of it like a judge weighing evidence in a courtroom.
Okay.
Some pieces of evidence are more reliable than others, and the judge has to decide which ones to trust more.
So is the brain basically saying, I'm not sure which information to trust my predictions or what I'm actually sensing?
Exactly.
Uh,
And in depersonalization, there might be an imbalance in this precision weighting,
Sure.
particularly when it comes to those internal signals from the body.
right.
The brain might start to doubt those signals
Mhm.
and place more emphasis on external sensory information.
So it's like your brain is saying, my body feels weird and unfamiliar, so I must not be in the right body.
That's a simplified way to put it, but you're getting the idea.
Okay.
And this distrust of bodily signals can create a vicious cycle.
A vicious cycle. How so?
The more the brain distrusts those signals, the less it uses them to update its internal model of the self.
Right.
And that just reinforces the feeling of detachment.
Oh, I see. So it just gets worse and worse.
It can, yeah.
It's starting to make sense,
Yeah.
but I'm still a bit confused about sensory attenuation.
Okay.
Last time we said that was a good thing. Because it filters out all the distracting sensations we don't need to pay attention to.
Right.
So how does that play into depersonalization?
You're right. Sensory attenuation is normally helpful.
Yeah.
It helps us focus on what's important and ignore the rest.
Mm-hmm.
But in depersonalization, this process might be disrupted.
Okay, so it's not working properly.
Instead of attenuating self-generated sensations, the brain might actually become more aware of them.
So instead of tuning those sensations out, the brain is turning them up.
Exactly.
Wow.
Imagine constantly feeling the subtle movements of your chest as you breathe.
Right.
Or the feeling of your clothes against your skin.
I don't usually notice those things.
These usually unnoticed sensations become hypersalient,
Okay.
adding to the feeling of strangeness and detachment.
I see what you mean. It's like suddenly becoming aware of all the background noise you usually filter out,
Yeah.
and it just makes the world feel off kilter.
It's like that this heightened awareness of bodily sensations can lead to a kind of hyper-reflexivity,
Hyperflex.
where the I becomes this scrutinizing observer, constantly monitoring and analyzing the me that's being observed.
So the person is stuck in this loop of overthinking their own body,
Right.
which just pushes them further away from that embodied sense of self.
Exactly.
And remember, depersonalization exists on a spectrum.
It does.
Most of us experience fleeting moments of detachment, like when we're sleep deprived or stressed.
Right.
But for people with the disorder, these feelings are persistent.
Yeah.
And can be incredibly distressing.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how something as fundamental as our sense of self can be so easily disrupted.
It is.
It really makes you think about how delicate the balance is between our brains, our bodies, and our perceptions.
It does. And it highlights how much we still have to learn about the brain and the embodied self.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to discuss.
Okay, what's that?
The idea that depersonalization might be linked to abnormally high levels of uncertainty in the brain.
Uncertainty. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about times when you felt uncertain or out of control.
Yeah.
Maybe during a stressful event, a period of major life changes, or even after a bad experience with certain drugs.
Okay, I can see that. Those are definitely times when I've felt disconnected from myself, like I was just going through the motions.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
When the brain is bombarded with unpredictable or overwhelming experiences, it can go into a state of hypervigilance,
Okay, hypervigilance.
constantly scanning for potential threats and trying to make sense of an unpredictable world.
So it's like your brain is on high alert thinking, danger. danger,
Yes.
even when there's no real threat present.
Exactly. In that state, the brain might start to prioritize external sensory information over internal bodily signals.
Okay.
Remember that precision weighting we talked about? It's like
Yeah.
the brain is saying, I can't trust what's happening inside my body right now. I need to focus on what's going on in the outside world to stay safe.
So external cues become more important than internal cues, which could explain why people with depersonalization feel so detached from their own bodies.
That's the theory.
Wow.
This state of hypervigilance might also explain some of the other common symptoms of depersonalization,
Like what?
like emotional numbing and a sense of unreality.
So if the brain is too focused on scanning for danger, it might suppress emotions and filter out information that doesn't fit its threat detection schema.
Precisely. It's fascinating, isn't it?
It's definitely fascinating, but it's also a little scary to think that our brains can essentially edit our reality in such a profound way,
I agree.
especially when it comes to something as fundamental as our sense of self.
It's a reminder of how intricate and vulnerable the systems are that create our experience of the world and of ourselves.
Okay, so we've talked about disruptions in prediction,
Yeah.
imbalances in precision weighting,
Yeah.
and problems with sensory attenuation.
Right.
But does this mean people with depersonalization are less accurate at perceiving their own bodily sensations?
That's a great question, and it brings us to the important distinction between interoceptive accuracy, sensibility, and awareness.
Okay, those are three different things.
Remember, interoceptive accuracy is your objective ability to detect bodily sensations, like your heartbeat.
Right, so that's how good you actually are at picking up on those signals.
Exactly. But interoceptive sensibility is more about your subjective perception of those sensations, how much attention you pay to your body, and how intense those sensations feel to you.
So you could be accurate at detecting your heartbeat,
Mm-hmm.
but you might not pay much attention to it,
Right.
or it might not bother you.
Precisely. And then there's interoceptive awareness,
Okay,
which is your metacognitive understanding of your own interoceptive abilities.
so that's like knowing whether you're generally good at noticing changes in your body or whether you tend to trust your gut feelings.
You got it.
Okay.
These three dimensions of interoception, accuracy, sensibility, and awareness are distinct but can influence each other.
So how does this all relate to depersonalization?
That's the million-dollar question.
Okay.
Some research suggests people with depersonalization might actually be more accurate at detecting certain bodily sensations like their heartbeat
Oh, right.
compared to people without the disorder.
So their brains are picking up the signals loud and clear,
Yeah.
but they're just not interpreting them in a way that feels integrated with their sense of self.
Exactly. Their interoceptive system might be working overtime, but the information is being interpreted as alien or threatening rather than as part of their own embodied experience.
So their body is screaming at them,
In a way, yeah.
but they're not listening.
Or they're misinterpreting the message.
Wow. This is all so complex.
It is.
It's like depersonalization is this perfect storm of disrupted predictions,
Right.
misinterpretations, and heightened awareness of bodily sensations, all leading to this fragmented sense of self.
That's a great way to put it. You've really grasped the key concepts.
I am glad.
I think our listeners deserve a quick recap before we move on.
Yeah, let's do that.
Can you summarize the key points about depersonalization?
Let's see.
Today we've explored how depersonalization might be linked to disruptions in the brain's ability to predict and interpret bodily sensations. We talked about aberrant precision weighting,
Right.
where the brain might be overemphasizing external cues and underemphasizing internal signals, and how this could lead to feelings of detachment.
Right. And we discussed how sensory attenuation, which normally helps us filter out distractions, might be disrupted in depersonalization,
Yes.
leading to heightened awareness of usually unnoticed bodily sensations.
You got it. We also explored the possibility that depersonalization might be linked to a state of hypervigilance in the brain,
Right.
which can further disrupt the processing of internal bodily signals.
And finally, we talked about how these disruptions might be related to the complex interplay of interoceptive accuracy, sensibility, and awareness.
You summarized it perfectly. And this brings us to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore what these insights might mean for understanding and treating depersonalization disorder and what they reveal about the incredible plasticity of the human brain.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Right.
It's amazing how much ground we've covered so far.
Yeah, it really is.
Exploring the brain's incredible ability to predict sensations, filter out noise, and create a sense of self. But I'm also left wondering,
Yeah.
if our brains are so powerful, Is there any hope for people experiencing depersonalization? Can this feeling of detachment ever be reversed?
That's a question a lot of people ask.
Yeah.
And it's where the research gets really exciting.
Oh, good.
Remember how we talked about the brain's plasticity, its ability to constantly adapt and rewire itself?
Yeah, it's like the brain is a muscle that can be trained and strengthened.
Exactly. And
Okay.
that's where the potential for therapeutic interventions comes in.
Okay, therapeutic interventions. If depersonalization is rooted in disruptions of prediction sensory processing and precision weighting,
Mhm.
could we retrain the brain to better integrate bodily sensations and create a more cohesive sense of self?
So it's like offering the brain a new set of blueprints,
Yeah.
helping it rebuild that sense of meatingness that's been lost.
That's the idea, and there's a growing field of research exploring the potential of interoceptive training
Okay.
and feedback as therapeutic interventions for depersonalization disorder.
Interoceptive training, what does that even look like?
One approach involves practicing mindfulness of specific bodily sensations,
Okay, mindfulness.
like focusing on your breath or noticing the subtle rise and fall of your chest as you breathe.
So you're basically telling your brain,
Yeah.
hey, pay attention to these internal signals. They matter.
Precisely by repeatedly bringing your attention to these sensations,
Okay.
you can strengthen your brain's ability to accurately perceive and interpret them.
Right.
And there's another really cool technique called biofeedback.
Biofeedback, I've heard of that, but I'm not sure I fully understand it.
Imagine being hooked up to sensors that show you real-time data about your heart rate,
Okay.
muscle tension,
Yeah.
or even brainwave activity.
Try that to tits.
It's like giving your brain a mirror, showing it what's happening inside in a way that's usually hidden from us.
That's amazing.
And then you can practice different techniques like deep breathing or guided relaxation
Okay.
and actually see how those techniques are changing your physiological responses.
That sounds pretty powerful.
It can be.
But does it actually work for depersonalization?
Well, it's still,
So it's like helping the brain become a master of its own internal landscape,
yeah.
understanding and integrating those bodily signals in a way that feels safe and familiar.
You nailed it. And the key here is that by strengthening those interoceptive abilities, individuals might develop a more grounded and embodied sense of self,
Okay.
which could lead to more lasting improvements in well-being.
So it's a more holistic approach.
It is.
This makes me think back to our discussion about sensory attenuation.
Yeah.
If people with depersonalization are overly aware of those usually unnoticed bodily sensations,
Right.
could these interventions help them regulate that sensory input?
That's a great question, and it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
By practicing mindfulness,
Right.
individuals might learn to become more comfortable with those sensations and learn to differentiate between sensations that are helpful to pay attention to and
Yep.
those they can safely tune out.
That makes sense.
So it's not about eliminating bodily sensations altogether,
Okay.
but rather about learning to become more attuned to them.
Finding a balance between awareness and filtering.
So finding that sweet spot
Right.
and this shift in attention could have a ripple effect on other aspects of the depersonalization experience.
I think so.
By feeling more grounded in their bodies, individuals might also feel less detached from their emotions, thoughts, and actions.
Exactly.
This whole concept of the embodied self is so fascinating.
It is.
It really underscores how interconnected our minds and bodies truly are.
It really does. And it challenges us to rethink our assumptions about who we are and what it means to be a self.
You know, at the beginning of this deep dive,
Yeah.
we asked the question, how much control do we really have over who we are?
Right. A big question.
Now that we've explored interoceptive inference,
Mm-hmm.
depersonalization,
Mm-hmm.
and the potential for change, what are your thoughts on that question?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think the takeaway here is that while our brains are constantly shaping our reality and our sense of self, we are not simply passive passengers.
We have the power to influence the way our brains work, to shape our experiences, and ultimately to shape who we become.
It's a message of empowerment, isn't it?
It is.
Even when faced with challenges like depersonalization, there's always potential for growth and healing.
I agree, and it's a reminder that the journey of self-discovery is an ongoing one.
Right.
The more we understand about the intricate interplay of brain, body, and experience,
Yeah.
the more we can harness that knowledge to cultivate a more grounded, embodied, and compassionate sense of self.
That's a beautiful thought and a perfect way to wrap up our deep dive into the embodied self.
I agree.
We've explored some complex and at times challenging ideas, but I think it's left us with a greater appreciation for the amazing capabilities of the human brain and the profound connection between our minds and bodies.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope our listeners have come away with a new understanding of what it means to be human, to be embodied, and to be constantly evolving.
I'm sure they have. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep embracing the incredible mystery of being you.